Welcome to Damn Good Movie Memories with your host, Brian Davis. This podcast is the cure for your long commute and super boring workday. Hey there, it's Brian Davis, and for this week's episode, we're going to cover the movie It Happened to Jane from 1959. The studio was Columbia Pictures. The release date was August 5th, 1959. The running time, 97 minutes, and it was in color. Leonard Maltin from his classic movie guide gives it 2.5 out of 4 stars. He writes, breezy, likable comedy. Doris Day runs a Maine lobstery, and Jack Lemmon is her lawyer. Together, they tangle with the ultra-cheap villain, Ernie Kovacs, who hams mercilessly. Now, I've covered a number of Doris Day films already, including Do Not Disturb, Move Over Darling, and with 6 you get Egg Roll. Like those films, It Happened to Jane is yet another pleasant family comedy where you can put it on at any time and simply have an enjoyable time. Day had a knack of being an actress that everyone just adored, and her films are timeless. In addition, you get Jack Lemmon in the film, equally as legendary as Doris Day. Now, I've covered one of his most famous films, which came out also in 1959, Some Like It Hot. We also covered a terrific comedy from 1970, The Out-of-Towners, and eventually we're going to cover one of his later-day classics, Glengarry Glen Ross. Alright, let's get into the film. As with most Doris Day films, the opening credits feature a song sung by her, and in this case, the song title is the same as the film. Jane Osgood, that's Doris Day, is a single mom. She's a widow of 2 young kids and runs a small lobster business in Maine. On this particular day, a large shipment of lobsters, 300 of them, were shipped from Jane's location, but they were spoiled during the transfer by the railroad company.
Janie, I'm sorry.
Why? Homer, how could this happen? You know I've checked everything. The train schedules, the running time. I've kept lobsters in the seaweed for as long as it would take your slowest freight to go 2,000 miles. They lived then, why would they die now?
All I know is the Marshalltown Country Club refused shipment Monday.
Monday? They were supposed to be there Friday. They arrived in Marshalltown Friday afternoon at 4. Homer, it's not my fault, it's the railroad's fault. They let them lay there down until Monday, that's what they did.
Oh, will you sign it, Homer?
Why? Can't they see what it says here? Notify consignee immediately. Oh, it's not fair.
Janie, honey, Harry Foster Malone proved that 2 days after he took over this railroad. I heard he was going to put bleachers into freight cars and use them for commuter trains. Now, that ain't a man to talk to about what's fair and what ain't fair.
Homer, I'm not gonna talk.
What'll it be today, Janie?
Nothing, Aaron.
Uncle Otis, tell me what you think of this thing, will you? Here. Mr. Claude Fullerton, editor, High River Gazette, High River, Maine, dear Mr. Fullerton. As a Democratic candidate for first selectman in Cape Ann, I'm asking for the endorsement of your newspaper in the... Uncle Otis, I'm reading a letter to you. Will you listen to me?
I heard it, George. It's the same as last year's.
It's not the same as last year's. Now listen, the issues demand...
George,
what's the matter?
the E&P murdered my lobsters.
They what? Murder?
They're down at the station dead.
They're
All
what?
300 of them.
Well, now, wait a minute.
They lay in
How?
those tubs like they were coffins.
Wait a minute. How?
Those lobsters arrived in Marshalltown Friday afternoon, and the E&P just let them sit there till Monday. That's what they did.
Well, that's impossible.
Anything's possible with the E&P these days.
Boy, my first order. George, I need that money.
Well, you're going to get the money.
Tires for the station wagon.
Now, please, now calm down and listen to me. You'll get the money because you're in the right. Do you hear me? There you have the bill of lading.
Looks like you got a case at last, boy.
And don't you have something to do?
I'm retired.
Oh.
Well, I've got a client, Uncle Otis.
Okay, boy. Bye, Janie. Good luck, lawyer. You'll need it if you're looking to get money from Harry Foster Malone.
What?
We're going to get the money.
Mean?
We're going to get the money. Do you have the bill of lading, dear?
It's at the house.
Well, then we'll go back and get it.
Look, all I know is that they went out Thursday on the fast freight and they came back dead on old 97.
Honey, we're going to write the railroad and they're
George,
going to...
I've worked so hard.
Dear, the railroad is going to have to pay you. It's an open and shut case.
Are you sure?
Cub Scouts on it.
Oh, boy.
The lawyer, George Denham, played by Jack Lemmon, is also Jane's friend and promises to get her reimbursed by the E&P Railroad for their negligence. We then go to the high-rise New York office of Harry Foster Malone, that's Ernie Kovacs, who now runs the railroad. As expected, he's a typical bigwig asshole who couldn't care less about the common folk like Jane.
Next.
The comfort station in Providence, General.
Don't call me General. I was a general for exactly 8 weeks, and I spent those 2 months buying ski poles for mountain troops. Someday I'd like to find out why a man who's supposed to know how to ski has to use poles. What about the comfort station?
Well, Danny said they need to be painted.
Yeah.
You're confirmed on flight 677 to Boston, Mr. Malone.
Miss Beardsley, I run a railroad. Don't book me on airplanes. Use your head. Miserable broad, and what she's doing. I don't intend to paint any comfort station. You tell Danny if he wants to paint those stations, he can paint them himself. On his own time. With his own paint. What else?
The Memorial Day posters, General. Harry.
No broads. You need broads. Get a cup up and bikinis. I don't expect to sell tickets with that. Hey, get those 2 from, where are they from?
Newark.
Yeah, Newark. I'll get him. What else?
Well, Harry, our overall earnings situation in the 16 months since you assumed control...
Took control
is excellent. However, Harry, I'm afraid that we're headed for trouble.
You must be nuts. I took this Yankee boiled dinner you call the railroad apart, put it together again, and made it pay. You're telling us we're heading for trouble. You're out of
Harry,
mind.
after all, I am the general counsel for the E&P, and I have some knowledge of the public psychology.
Yeah, sure.
You can't continue to run roughshod over the consumer.
This hollandaise tastes like burnt almond. What consumer? Get it out of here, will you?
Here is the case in point, Harry. Mrs. Jane Osgood of Cape Ann, Maine, owner of Mail Order Lobsters and Months with No R, Incorporated. She shipped 300 live lobsters to Marshalltown. They were to be delivered on arrival. Well, you'll remember, Harry, that last month you cut agent service at several points on our West Branch.
Yeah, what about it?
The shipment arrived on Friday afternoon. There was no agent there to receive it. The lobsters died on our siding.
Do you have to tell me now?
I'm sorry.
Get this out of here, will you?
We are liable, Harry.
Oh, Pam, what do you bother me with all this jazz for?
We thought it might be wise in a public relations sense if I accompanied Harris to Cape Ann and delivered the check in person.
Both of you?
Goodwill, Harry.
Well, spread your goodwill, Harry, in one day. I don't want to see any more expense accounts with hotel suites on them. You boys are going to learn to pay for your own booze. There's no more per diem on this ball team. Eugene, give me some coffee.
Of course, while this meeting is going on, Malone is stuffing his face with lobster. The 2 reps from the railroad arrive at Jane's home later that evening. They want to settle for $700, and they have a check ready to give to Jane. And this is the retail price of what she lost. However, Jane's loss is much more than just losing that load, because her business reputation has been tarnished, as the customers will believe that her company won't be able to deliver on their orders. This was not Jane's fault. It was absolutely the railroad's negligence, and she deserves fair compensation. George arrives at the meeting and reiterates what Jane stated. The railroad representatives are emphatic that they will not pay more than $700 and make it clear that their legal staff of over 20 lawyers will crush a small-town lawyer if George and Jane attempt to recoup more money from the railroad. George understands what they're up against, but Jane refuses to take only $700. The reps leave with a "see you in court." So George and Jane do have their day in court, and the jury finds in favor of Jane in the amount of $2,500 and costs. However, just because a local court found in favor of Jane doesn't mean that the railroad is simply going to pay Jane what she won. Because the railroad has a team of lawyers and plenty of cash, they will appeal as much as possible to the higher courts in Maine and tie up Jane and George for as long as possible. This was the lawyer's plan all along, and why the average person almost never wins against a corporation. It's simply too expensive for a regular person to continue a lengthy legal battle. It's really sad, but it's the real truth of how the legal system works. Jane is rightfully frustrated, but even more determined to fight, and gets a genius idea. She files for a writ against a train that runs through her town, which is called the Old 97. Essentially, this writ grants Jane possession of a specific property that is owed to her, instead of receiving the cash settlement that she was awarded by the smaller court. Basically, she's going to take over the train in lieu of her $2,500. As expected, Malone is infuriated that his supposed great legal minds didn't prepare for this type of writ made by Jane, and now the Old 97 is stopped in its tracks in the downtown until Jane gets her financial settlement. The local newspaper calls a bigger newspaper in New York with the story, and soon Jane's fight against the railroad becomes big news, with the reporters from TV appearing in town to cover the story, showcasing the David vs. Goliath type fight for Jane versus an evil corporation. One of the newspaper reporters named Larry Hall, played by Steve Forrest, talks to Jane directly to get her life history.
Want to see where you are right now? Okay. That's Cape Ann. And that's the town hall. Right there, that's you. Did you know that Cape Ann is one of the few places left in America, or the whole world for that matter, where every person still votes on every single thing? Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Well, it is. Once a year, we all come here to the town meeting. Oh, by the way, next Thursday at 4 o'clock, the whole place will be filled with every man, woman, and child in Cape Ann. Of course, the kids don't vote, but boy, they listen and they learn. Town meeting will now come to order. Billy Osgood, you know the rules about animals. Remove that lobster.
Who's that, Sam?
That is.
And who are you?
Me? Oh, I'm Aaron Caldwell, first selectman.
Aaron Caldwell.
Yeah. Well, he also runs the grocery store in town. He's been first selectman as long as I can remember.
And George Denham was always a defeated candidate, huh?
No, not always. It used to be my dad. Of course, he came pretty close a couple of times to being elected, but never quite made it. Well, I guess he was just too idealistic, fighting for lost causes. You better watch your head when you come down.
I have a feeling you're a lot like your dad.
I hope so.
I know so. Well, you declared war on Goliath. You and your slingshot.
What?
Well, you fight for what you believe in. I like that. I like to believe I'm like that. That's the reason I became a newspaper man. The thin voice of principle may sound corny these days, but...
Not to me.
Nor to me. But what about Hank? It was Hank, wasn't it?
Yes, it was Hank.
What was he like?
There was only one Hank.
Janie! Boy, have I been looking. Do you know what these are?
Bills?
Bills. They're everything but bills. There's real money here. These are all orders for lobsters.
What?
Heck yeah. Hi there, Hall.
Hi.
And for some reason, every television show in the country seems to want you as a guest. On the
Me?
shows, yeah. Now, listen, read this. This is real vindication here. Malone's paying public is behind you. Listen. Hang on, girlie. Mallet Head Malone has been asking for it. Signed, a commuter.
Read the order.
Yeah, wait, I'm getting to him, but there's a very important one here that... There it is. Willing to let bygones be bygones. Send 250 lobsters immediately. Marshalltown Country Club.
Wait a minute, isn't that the deal that started this whole
That's
thing?
the one.
I love him.
Isn't that decent?
How about
George.
Can you furnish 100 lobsters for County Cork Night, Hibernian Brotherhood, Bronx, New York? 100!
It's the publicity, Janie. You're the most famous gal in America. Jane, that slingshot turned into quite a weapon.
Wait, a slingshot. What?
Well, George Larry said that I was David and Harry Foster Malone was Goliath.
Huh. I never thought of it that way.
Well, how many is that altogether, George?
I don't know. It's over 500. I haven't counted them yet.
What do you bet there'll be more?
Ah! George doesn't gamble, do you, George?
I don't believe in it.
Well, you ought to try it sometime, George. There's nothing like winning.
Except losing.
This is no time to talk about losing. Listen, Janie, I've got to call my paper on this, and then I'm clear. How about dinner tonight? We can celebrate all this.
Yeah, she's busy.
I am, Larry. The wolf pack is coming over tonight for a cookout, and since I'm den mother, natural. Hey, guess what we're having?
I love lobster.
Do you?
Can I use your phone, young lady?
Well, if you reverse the charges. George? Come on.
As George mentioned in the last clip, Jane's fight has done more for her business than before the railroad mishap. However, her joy is short-lived as Malone has decided to fight back on her writ of the old 97. He's decided to charge her for rent for the actual railroad tracks the train is stationed at, and the amount will cut into any additional profits she will receive from her new clients. Malone wants $1 a foot, which is over $250, and he wants payment immediately. Jane, of course, won't back down from this fight now against Malone, and with the help of Larry and his ability to publicize her battle, she will attempt to raise funds to offset the rent costs of the tracks. Jane goes to New York to appear on a variety of television shows to promote her fight against Malone and the railroad.
Now then, panel, I am not going to ask this young lady to reveal her correct name to us because we knew her name, we would know her secret. So we will simply call her Miss X. Now, Miss X, if you'll whisper your secret to me, we'll reveal it to the folks at home. Panel, I think I must say that ordinarily we would not accept such a secret on our show. But I've been talking a great deal to this young lady backstage, and I tell you, by golly, I think she is right.
I want that man barred from my railroad for life.
Now, we'll start the questioning with Bill Cullen, please.
Ma'am, this male that you're involved with, is he human?
He certainly is not.
Or is it something like a snake or a baboon or something like that?
Harry, I tell you, we've got trouble. This newspaper, you can't...
Get this, Sloan. I'm 52 years old and I was born on the Lower East Side in a cold water flat. I wasn't lucky enough to get to college or law school. I'm a Slav that came up the hard way. But let me give you a chunk of information. Anybody who gives trouble to Harry Foster Malone gets trouble. Got that?
Have it your way, Harry.
I certainly have not.
Jane, take your
Now,
blindfold off and take
every time we stop at Cape Ann, it costs us money, right?
And I know exactly what you mean. I hate
Watch this bit. Look out.
All right, let's go to Henry Morgan, please.
Isn't me, is it?
Yes, Harry.
Miss Beardsley, get me Gary Moore on CBS. Yeah, right now. Be sure to tell him it's me.
Come on now, think a little bit hard about it.
No, Henry, I can work on it. Oh, thank you. Excuse me, panel, just a moment. Hello, this is Gary Moore. Yeah? Hey, that's great. Yeah, I'll tell everybody.
Gary, I know who it's got to be.
Henry, you can take your blindfold off. I have just this moment talked to Harry Foster Malone, president of the E&P Railroad. He is canceling her rent, and he has given her the train.
All right.
Well, be careful what you wish for, Jane, because owning the train isn't actually a good thing for her. The train is important for other businesses in town to operate their business, and she doesn't have the workers or the know-how to run a train properly. Malone has also decided not to operate his trains in the town that Jane lives in, which leaves her as public enemy number one to all the locals who need the train for their livelihood. Jane has 48 hours to get the old 97 off the tracks, or he will avoid the town forever. So how will Jane overcome this latest obstacle? As you already guessed, there's a love triangle as George and Larry vie for Jane's affection. How will it play out? Well, you're just going to have to watch the final 30 minutes and find out for yourself. Though you can probably guess the outcome, you're going to still enjoy the ride. As with almost every Doris Day film, she's a delight to watch. And also having Jack Lemmon as part of the cast, you really can't go wrong. So check it out and enjoy. All right, some fun facts. So the original titles of It Happened to Jane included Miss Casey Jones and that Jane from Maine. The film was re-released in 1961 with the title of Twinkle and Shine. Ugh. Jack Lemmon wrote that he thought this was a good, funny movie that didn't do well because of its terrible title. He thought he and Doris Day had very good chemistry together, and he regretted that they never did another film. Doris Day wrote that her manager and husband, Martin Melcher, was terribly concerned over the box office failure of this film, along with The Tunnel of Love, which came out a year prior. Their failures caused Day to drop out of the top 10 of box office stars. And Day said that then Melcher had words trying to hustle her to any film for the money instead of waiting for good scripts that would have produced better results. This was one of Doris Day's rare total failures at the box office, as I mentioned. which is why Columbia tried re-releasing it under that awful title Twinkle and Shine. The second release was no more successful than the first. Later that same year, Day enjoyed one of the biggest hits of her career, Pillow Talk, which was the first film she co-starred with Rock Hudson. And by the end of 1959, Doris Day was 4th on the top 10 list of box office stars. All right, one of the stars of this podcast, it's not me. It's Lindsay. She loves her old movies, and she's discovering all these old movies that she's never seen, and she saw It Happen to Jane for the first time. So let's get her take on this film, and then I'll be back next week to talk about yet another random movie from my DVD collection. Okay, we're back with Lindsay. Welcome back.
Hey, Brian. Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me back.
Would this ever happen to Lindsay? This type of plot?
That's a good question.
Well, you're never going to be married.
No.
With kids.
No, but she's kind of a fighter like me. Jane is. So, she's got a justice meter that she operates off of, and I'm very much like that. So I appreciated that quality in Jane for sure. She was only asking for what was right and what was fair, and she was going to go down swinging on it.
That sounds like you.
That does sound like me.
Okay, so the movie was supposed to take place in Maine. However, it was actually recorded in the state you lived the first half of your life in.
Yeah, Connecticut. It was filmed in Chester, Connecticut, and I think that's really funny because it was so close to a place where I used to work for maybe 4 or 5 years out of school in Connecticut. And it's a really nice area of Connecticut, and I mean, Connecticut's kind of a cool state anyway, but yeah, it was really neat to kind of see and vibe that Connecticut-ness in the film. I really appreciated that. It had a New England vibe for sure.
But did it really, because again, this was filmed probably 20 years before you were born. So did any of it look similar, or had it really changed by the time you were remembering?
I mean, it looked more Connecticut than Maine. I'll say that. I know this is supposed to take place in Maine, and Maine is, the East Coast hub for, lobsters, and that was a huge part of the film. I don't know of a lot of lobsters in Connecticut, so I was a little like, oh, that's interesting. But no, I think that some of the backdrop of it, like the way the little town looked and kind of the living on the seaside and the homes, like that, they looked very Connecticut. Maybe not so much Maine, but very Connecticut.
So this is a very typical Doris Day type movie. Usually she plays, I wouldn't say a single mom. Usually she's never divorced. It's always she's a widower or a widow, and she always has kids. Not always, but again, there's a certain trope that I think people liked her in. So is this, this is just kind of like a fun family movie that they just don't make anymore. Did you like how everything played out? Was it too predictable, or did you like it because it was predictable because it's like comfort food for movies?
Yeah, these old ones are always interesting to me. But I think...
You use that word a lot.
Yeah, because sometimes I don't exactly... I'm trying to put into perspective when things were filmed. And remember that when I talk about my sort of perspective or feelings around it, put yourself in the era in which this film was made and think about it that way. When I do that with this film, I think it felt really good and wholesome and right, and it had strong messaging. I think it portrayed women in a pretty strong light, in a sense, back in this time when she was a widow and she was fending for herself and her business and taking care of her children. She was making a go of it, and she wasn't relying on anyone necessarily else to do it. She was taking her business seriously and wanting to be successful. And she also wasn't looking for anything extra other than what she really was entitled when her shipment didn't make it on time and the lobsters sadly died. She only wanted to be compensated for what she lost. She wasn't trying to win the railroad. She wasn't trying to put it over on, the big railroad company or anything. So when I look at it in the time period it happened and the story that it tells, yeah, I think it's probably one of those feel-good, comfort films. There are others from, similar-esque time period that you and I have watched recently where I'd say, it's a little more cringy. But this one just felt like good, kind of wholesome, enjoyment, and there was some fun comedy. And Doris Day being Doris Day, again, you kind of have to love her. She's just sort of a lovable person and very earnest. And I enjoy watching her because she's kind of like what you would have hoped that every great mom was from this time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she's like a June Cleaver type.
That's a good comparison. And also, Jack Lemmon kind of played typical Jack Lemmon, kind of not the sad sack, but he's always the one that's, you would hope he ends up with the girl. He doesn't always end up with the girl, but he means well and he's doing his best for her. And the funny one, and the one that you kept commenting on, was the owner of the railroad, which is Henry Foster Malone, played by the comedian and actor Ernie Kovacs. And you're like, that guy's got to be like 60 or something like that. He was 39 when you were, and then you were like, oh my God, he's the oldest looking 39.
Blows my mind. If nothing else, even if you don't like Doris Day or don't like any of these types of films, please at least look this up on like Google or Yahoo or IMDb or whatever you use, and check out what he looked like. Like, look at a photo of him from this time, please. There is no way, like modern 39. It really was mind blowing. It was one of the craziest, most outstanding parts of the film, which is weird because it had nothing to do with the film. But I just could not get over that this man was 39 years old playing that role. He looked 60 years old.
Well, the reason we keep bringing this up is because health has changed over people's lifestyles. And so it seemed like everyone smoked back then.
Drank constantly.
And probably didn't always eat right.
No.
And so you add those three combinations. And
he was a gluttonous fool in the beginning when he was eating his meal, remember?
So I don't think this was too far-fetched of how, people didn't live as long, but they also didn't look as good. They looked like an old...
Aged.
Yeah.
Like a little haggard.
Like 60 looked like 90 back then.
Yeah. And then the other crazy part of the film was when Doris Day's character met a journalist...
Yep.
Who took an interest in her story and her plight for what was right, recouping what was hers around the loss of her lobsters and the railroad she ends up like kind of accidentally acquiring.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because he's sort of the well put together, younger, svelte kind of guy who's coming in to sweep her off of her feet. I love that he said he was 33 years old and he looked about 45.
Yeah.
But also in very good shape, and he's not partaking in any of the things.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought this film was interesting because, again, in the time frame, you would fully expect from many of the other films I've seen, damsel in distress, guy's coming in, and he's going to rescue her from this tough position. And she wasn't really having it, right? Like, she appreciated the man's interest and desire to help her and the publicity, but she kind of wasn't looking for that. She wasn't trying to take advantage of anybody. And when he was interested in kind of taking her away from everything with his marriage proposal, which seemed quite sudden.
Yeah.
But lots of the proposals seem sudden in these films because, again, they're trying to do it in a really quick period of time.
And more people got married back then.
Yeah, so it just seemed like super duper fast.
Yeah.
Compared to modern times.
Sure.
But yeah, she was kind of like, no. And she could have done it. And I laughed when he's like, I have X amount in my bank account. And you hear it in modern times. You're like, oh my God. Like, I don't think you can pay a month's rent with that.
That was Jack Lemmon.
But that was, back in the day, right? But she didn't, she wasn't looking for anything like that. So it's almost as if, I don't know if it was Doris Day. I don't know if it was this type of film. I feel like it's kind of her films. I've seen it in a few others. It's almost like she's bucking the trend of the time.
And that's why I think, people that don't go back and today's history is non-existent with the TikTok culture and the ADD culture. There were many very, very popular actresses back in the day that carried films like Doris Day, like Barbara Stanwyck, like, folks like that, Katharine Hepburn, Audrey Hepburn, that they made more than their counterparts too. But it's like people want to almost act like back in the dark ages, nobody had, and of course there was, discrepancies. Of course, it wasn't all equal, but it wasn't all horrible either. And films like this, she carried the film. You went to go see it because Doris Day was in it.
Oh, yeah.
You really can't name many actors or actresses anymore that you're going to go see a film simply because they're in it. So, this, I don't think it's as bleak back then as the children of today want to make it seem.
Yeah, she was definitely a, air quotes, modern woman in the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
And she stood her ground and did the right thing and tried to do the right thing. And I mean, again, it's hard to not really appreciate Doris Day. Like, she is pretty lovable. There are characters that some other actresses of the day played that seem a little more helpless damsel in distress, but I don't really see that with her films. No. So it's kind of refreshing to see what she does, because she's still super wholesome and fun. Like, there's this scene, has nothing to do with anything really, but there's this scene where she and Jack Lemmon, who was kind of like leading a Boy Scout troop, I guess, at the time, and she's maybe like a den mom or something for the group,
camp out?
Yeah, the camp out. Her son is involved. Yeah. And there's just a really charming scene where all the boys are outside and she's like, she sings, right? Mm-hmm. She has a beautiful voice, so she's leading a song with everyone there. And it's that moment where you're like, if I was that age at that time, I'd want to be sitting right there in that Boy Scout uniform or whatever with that mom, like enjoying that night on the water. It just felt like everything that was good and wholesome about life was sort of encapsulated in a scene like that. And one thing that's great about Doris Day and the films I've seen her in, including this one, is that those moments are kind of ever present. Mm-hmm. And that's nice. You talk about film being an opportunity to escape or walk away from like the pressures of everyday life or what everyday life like really looks like. This kind of did that, hearkening back to maybe like a warmer time or a time when, our parents would have been like teenagers or whatever, or maybe like middle schoolers. I don't, what was the year that the film was?
59.
59. Okay, so yeah, they would have been younger than that. Mm-hmm. But they would have been like 10, 11, whatever years old. And they obviously would have been the kids in the film,
They would have been the Boy Scouts, yeah.
And so you think about what it might have been like back then, and I don't know, that's cool, right? Mm-hmm. Like, there is a bit of escapism in this one. A lot of what you see in here maybe wouldn't look like what the modern world looked like. But then again, in small towns, it might. Mm-hmm. Another thing that happens to me and probably happens to a lot of people, if you live in bigger cities and grew up in bigger cities in very populous areas, you tend to think that life looks like what you've seen life look like your entire life. Mm-hmm. And the reality is that's not what the majority of the states or the world really looks like. No. It's very skewed version. There may be people who think that this looks like normal everyday life because they do come from a small, quaint, everybody kind of knows everybody and helps everybody town. How awesome is that, right? Like, to me, it's a little bit more idyllic, but to some, this might look like what life looks like today.
Well, frankly, you grew up in it's funny, you grew up in a smaller state, and I grew up obviously in the Bay Area.
I grew up in Connecticut.
Yeah. So, but eventually, most of your life has been in big cities. So, but you remember what it's like being in the smaller town. So, was your childhood similar to this small town where people were? You go to the local. You all vote, and you go to that local town hall type of deal.
It wasn't that small.
Yeah.
I came from really nice suburbia, but it wasn't that small. However, it was pretty quaint and idyllic, and I remember coming back one of my summers from college, and 3 of my closest friends came to visit me in Connecticut that summer. And I remember when they showed up and I'm showing them around like our little downtown, one of my friends joked like, okay, when are all of like the fairies going to pop out from behind the bushes and sprinkle their magic fairy dust, as if to say this place kind of seems like one of those like idyllic dreamlands, like it doesn't seem real. So, and that's a person who grew up in a very big, southern state, and in a very large city at that. So I think there are people that think my town might be like that even more than I do. But I can say that the charm of Connecticut kind of came through in it, and that resonated with me, even though I came from a bigger town than the one this was filmed in. I really appreciated it. This was one of those, I guess, nice surprise films that it did kind of resonate with me. Keep in mind the time, right, when you watch something like this.
Well, look, the main plot is a railroad.
Yeah.
So, again, we were driving in Arizona during the summer. We saw one of those long, freight trains.
Oh, yeah.
But all the shipments were coming from China. Welcome to 2023. But here, commerce was basically through the railway.
Yeah.
So she was trying to get her shipment on time and was dependent on the railroad.
Oh, it was her lifeline.
That was her lifeline. So it was interesting because, a lot of people might not have known about like writs, writ of execution, to what she pulled, the legal tactic she pulled that the lawyer of the railroad didn't even think about doing.
Yeah, they underestimated her pretty significantly,
Right.
didn't they? Yeah, they did. And again, she wasn't trying for that.
No.
She really just wanted the money for the lost lobsters.
Yeah.
If she had gotten a check
Yeah.
after saying, hey, this happened and help make me whole here, make it right.
Yeah.
And they had handed her the check that wasn't insulting, like,
Well, you wouldn't have had a movie.
Yeah, you wouldn't have had a movie,
Yeah.
but she would have just walked on.
She would have. Yeah.
New day, fresh start, et cetera,
So
but it didn't happen that way.
To wrap up, did you like the chemistry between Doris Day and Jack Lemmon?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it seemed a little bit, they seemed more friend than lovers. Like, it's a little, it almost seemed like maybe they did choose to have marriage of convenience because it's just easier for everyone at the end. But you could
thanks
tell.
for giving her away.
Wow. Did I just give it away?
Kinda.
Oh, boy. You want to cut this part out?
Sure.
All right.
Keep going.
Where do I
don't
pick it
know.
up?
Just go.
Well, start over with a question.
No, just keep going. I'll probably end up leaving all this in
You're
there.
really going to leave this in?
Yeah.
No, cut it out. Well, ask me again.
No, I'm not going to ask you again if I leave this all
I
in.
don't want to ruin it for people.
It's already ruined. Keep going.
No, it's not. Nobody has to hear this. Nobody has to hear this part.
So you feel that they always seemed like good friends because they didn't get married. They grew up together. And so once her husband died, you could tell he always held a flame for her.
Yes, he absolutely always was interested in her.
And obviously she loved him because she was always going to him for help and everything, and he always was happy to do it.
Well, maybe she only realized the feelings that she had when they went through like an ordeal.
Yeah.
That this was an ordeal. And sometimes that happens. You realize something after you've gone through and survived something together. And so maybe...
To be fair, it's a Doris Day movie, and Jack Lemmon saying, you know what's going to happen. I'm just, giving you a hard time.
Okay.
Spoiler
I don't like
Lindsay
to spoil
spoils
things for people. I'm usually really good at
maybe
not
they don't
doing
really
that.
end up to... I don't remember them getting married.
Well, then maybe
watch
you should
the
watch
movie.
the film.
Yeah.
Wink, wink.
So you recommend this, obviously.
Yeah, I think it's a really, cute, nostalgic, kind of warm piece that's reflective of the time, but yet also has that twist in that the female character bucks the trend for that time.
Yeah.
So it's got all the stuff I think you'd like from that late 50s, early 60s vibe, but at the same time it has a really strong female lead that I think a lot of people today would appreciate.
Well, that, and you have the villain who is incredibly sexist, which is kind of stereotypical.
And incredibly old looking.
Well, that, and I kept laughing. He's like, I ain't giving the broad anything.
Yeah, you're going to get
funny.
some of that.
It was funny, though.
And again, remember, he's the villain.
ridiculous.
He's the villain. And the villain is saying those types of things.
Yeah, you need your villain to be bad. Otherwise, how are you going to root for her? I mean, you need a strong villain.
Yeah. He fit. He was a strong, old-looking, but not old villain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oof. Lay off the booze and the
Cigars.
nicotine, folks. It's not great.
Yeah.
It's not great.
Well, thanks, Lindsay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I hope I didn't...
We're going to nickname you the Spoiler Broad.
Oh, boy. I'm sorry, everyone. Well, I hope you watch the movie anyway. It's totally worth it. And again, you could probably predict what was going to happen, right? I didn't really crush this one, did I?
Bye!
Bye!
If you enjoy this podcast and are an iTunes user, please do the show a favor and head on over to the official iTunes page for Damn Good Movie Memories. Be sure to leave a rating and a review. This will allow the show to appear higher in the algorithm and spread the joy of this podcast to the masses. If you are not an iTunes user, you can still listen and subscribe on Podbean at damngoodmoviememories.podbean.com. Be sure to like us on Facebook under our Damn Good Movie Memories page. You can also listen to a limited number of episodes on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode, and be sure to tune in next week for an all-new episode of Damn Good Movie Memories.